There is a place the locals never mark on maps. They call it Blackroot Pass, and when the fog rolls low enough, they say you can hear children crying beneath the ground. That was where I headed next. I had spent a few nights reviewing my footage from Iron Hollow, frame by frame, looking for any trace of what we saw in the woods. Nothing. No shape, no figure, no movement beyond the range of our flashlights. But I could hear something in the audio, a faint clicking like teeth chattering against wood. It played just before the gunshot, and again a few seconds after. I wanted to believe it was an echo. But deep down I knew better. When I reached Blackroot, there were no welcome signs. The town wasn't even on GPS. A cracked road wound through an endless forest until it ended at an old bridge with half the planks missing. A hand-painted sign leaned against a rock that read, "Turn around before they smell you." It was late afternoon, the kind of cold October light that makes every shadow stretch forever. I parked my Jeep near the bridge and walked the rest of the way. Every step echoed too loud on the wood, and halfway across I saw dark stains, footprints, small, bare and fresh. The only sign of life in town was a gas station that hadn't seen fuel in decades. The sign above it had faded, but I could still make out the words, "Hales General." The windows were boarded, except for one cracked pane where a flicker of candlelight glowed. When I stepped inside, the smell hit me, old kerosene and rust. An elderly man sat behind the counter, staring at nothing. His beard was long and tangled, his eyes glassy but sharp. "You came from the hollow," he rasped before I even spoke. My heart skipped. "How'd you know that?" He chuckled, a sound dry as paper. "They follow whoever disturbs them. I smelled it on you soon as you opened the door. That damp earth smell. You've been near 'em." I told him about the sheriff, about the noises, about the hand we saw gripping the tree. The old man didn't flinch. "They live under," he said. "Always have. Whole tunnels run through these mountains. Been there longer than we have. You can't shoot what don't come from up here." He motioned toward the back of the store. "You'll see proof soon enough." When I asked what he meant, he just said, "Wait for nightfall." I didn't want to, but curiosity always outweighed fear for me. I stayed. By sunset, the town looked completely abandoned. The candlelight in the store window was the only glow for miles. The man introduced himself as Eli Hale, said his father had run the store before him. He poured me a tin cup of what he called mountain tea and began talking in a low, cracked voice. "They come every year, just like the frost," he said. "They don't eat at first. They watch. They listen. Then they start taking, first the dogs, then the livestock. Then they take whatever's left wandering after dark." I asked if he'd ever seen one up close. His face went pale. "Seen? Boy, I've fed one." He told me it started 15 years ago. A storm had knocked out the bridge and no one could leave town. Supplies ran dry. One night a banging started under the floorboards of his house. He thought it was the pipes, until he saw fingers pushing through the cracks in the wood. He was too scared to move. Then a voice whispered, "Hungry." He threw down a can of peaches, and the voice went silent. After that, every October, he left food out on the porch. Meat, fruit, anything. When he forgot one year, his wife vanished. No signs of a struggle, just drag marks leading to the edge of the forest. As he spoke, I noticed the candle flicker, though there was no draft. His eyes darted toward the window. "They're close," he said. We both listened. At first, nothing. Then came that sound, the scraping. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. It came from below us. Eli's face drained of all color. "Back room," he hissed. "Now." We crept behind the counter and through a doorway into the storage area. It smelled like dust and gasoline. Eli handed me an old hunting rifle, his hands trembling. "If they touch you, it's over." You'll never stop hearing them. The scraping grew louder. Then the boards near the front began to bend, creaking under invisible weight. Something was crawling up through the cracks. I held my breath. The candlelight danced on the floorboards as they began to split. A hand emerged, pale, long, and glistening wet. The nails were blackened, the fingers too thin to belong to anything alive. Another hand followed, gripping the wood until the knuckles cracked. Eli raised his lantern. "Back!" he shouted. "I gave you what you wanted." A hiss answered him. Then the floor gave way entirely. A shape surged upward, slamming into the counter, knocking shelves over. I caught a glimpse, skin stretched tight over bone, eyes reflecting the lantern like animal glass. Its mouth was open too wide, lips torn at the edges, teeth small and crooked like baby teeth. Eli fired the rifle, but the sound barely echoed before the thing was gone, vanished back into the hole, leaving only the echo of that awful scraping. When the silence returned, we both just stood there, breathing hard. Eli's lantern shook in his hand. "They're hunting early this year," he whispered. "You brought October with you." I wanted to leave immediately, but the bridge back was gone when I reached it. The boards that had been there earlier now dangled loose, half sunk into the river. It looked like something had chewed through them. I stayed in my Jeep till dawn, doors locked, headlights off. I could see shadows moving in the tree line, too low to be human, too quick to be animals. The air was filled with faint whispers, overlapping, like children repeating words they didn't understand. When daylight finally came, I drove as fast as I could down the broken road until I reached an open stretch of highway. In the rearview mirror, the forest seemed to ripple, like something alive was crawling just beneath the surface of the earth. That was my second encounter, and for the first time I understood what Eli meant. They say the first frost in October wakes them up. Locals in the lower Appalachian valleys whisper that when the air gets cold enough to turn your breath white, the woods begin to stir. Branches creak differently, coyotes go silent, and if you listen long enough, you might hear what they call the crawling. I did not believe it until last October. My name is Daniel Cole. I am an independent journalist and documentary filmmaker who grew up in western North Carolina. For years I covered local myths, Appalachian disappearances, haunted hollers, and strange lights in coal towns. But nothing stuck with me quite like the stories of the feral people. Not Bigfoot, not monsters, humans. Humans who left society generations ago, who adapted to the caves, to the dark, to hunger. People who learned to move without being seen, and who only appear when the fog gets thick and the leaves start to rot. I went looking for them, and what I found in those mountains I wish I could forget. The first sighting came from a small town called Iron Hollow. Population maybe 200 if you counted every dog. The sheriff, an old man named Ryder Tate, agreed to talk if I met him in person. He refused to speak over the phone, saying, "You don't talk about them through wires. They hear through that." When I drove in, Iron Hollow looked like it was folding in on itself. Houses sagged under wet roofs, and the trees pressed close to the roads. The mist hung low, swallowing sound. I parked outside the sheriff's office, a one-room building with a flickering porch light, and waited. Sheriff Tate came out smoking a cigarette. His hands trembled slightly, even though he tried to hide it. "You ain't from here," he said flatly. "No, sir," I replied. "I'm making a piece on the feral people. I heard this area had sightings." His eyes darted to the tree line. "Don't call them that," he whispered. "They don't like the name." I waited for him to continue, but he just stared at the woods. Finally, he said, "Come back tomorrow night. I'll show you where they came down last year." That night I stayed in the only motel in town, a 2-story building with thin walls and a neon sign that buzzed all night. I woke up around 2 a.m. to something outside my window. Not a knock, not a voice, a dragging sound, like someone pulling a bag of wet clothes across gravel. When I pulled back the curtain, nothing was there. Only fog, rolling thick through the parking lot. But when I looked down, I noticed something strange in the condensation on the glass. Handprints, dozens of them, small, uneven, pressed against the outside of my window. The next evening, the sheriff was waiting in his truck. He looked like he had not slept. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. We drove north up a narrow road that disappeared into forest. After 10 minutes, he turned off the headlights. "We walk from here," he said. The woods were unnaturally quiet. No wind, no crickets, just that heavy Appalachian silence that feels like the whole world is holding its breath. The sheriff led the way with a flashlight that barely cut through the fog. After maybe half a mile, he stopped at a clearing. The ground was blackened like something had burned there. I knelt down and saw bones. Not animal bones, too small, too delicate. "What happened here?" I asked. "They came up from the holler," he said. "Every October, same thing. Someone gets curious, wanders too far in, and they drag 'em out. They don't eat 'em, not all the time. They just take pieces." I looked closer. The bones had marks, tiny grooves like teeth. I felt my stomach twist. "Why don't you do something?" I asked. He looked at me then, eyes pale in the beam of the flashlight. "You can't kill what don't want to die." Something cracked deep in the trees. We both froze. The sheriff's light swung toward the sound. Nothing, just blackness. Then another sound. Closer. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. The sheriff whispered, "Don't move." I could barely breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would echo. The footsteps circled the clearing, staying just beyond the edge of the light. I saw movement, something low to the ground, pale against the dirt, and then a hand, long fingers stretched thin, gripping the bark of a tree. The sheriff raised his gun. "Don't," I hissed. "You'll make it worse." But it was already too late. He fired once. The sound exploded through the woods. A scream followed, not animal, not human. A sound that scraped the inside of your skull. Something ran through the trees fast enough to shake the ground. Then silence. When we got back to the truck, the sheriff slammed the door and locked it immediately. His hands were shaking so violently he dropped the keys. "They remember faces," he said. "They don't forget." I left Iron Hollow the next morning. But before I crossed the county line, I saw something on the side of the road. A deer torn open. Its eyes were missing, but its body hadn't been touched. Just the eyes. As I drove away, I realized the sheriff had never told me what happened to the last person who went into those woods. Later, when I tried to call him for a follow-up, his number was disconnected. That was my first encounter. But it wasn't the last. By mid-October, I had traveled deeper into the mountains, collecting whispers, sightings, and warnings. Each story felt worse than the last, more personal, more desperate. Some people called them the Hollowborn. Others called them the Forgotten Folk. Whatever name they go by, one thing remains the same. When October comes, they come with it. And every year, someone disappears before the leaves are gone. It started with the sound of crying deep in the holler. Not a human cry. Not exactly. But not an animal either. It was somewhere in between, high-pitched, trembling, echoing through the trees like the wind itself was mourning. Jared froze on the muddy trail, flashlight shaking in his grip. He had been hiking in the Appalachians since sunrise, chasing one of those ghost stories locals told about the feral ones. He thought it was folklore. He thought it was all talk. But when the last orange light of evening drained from the sky, and the mist began to settle low between the trees. He realized just how alone he really was. He whispered to himself, "It's just a fox, it's just a fox," but deep down he knew. No fox cries like that. The crying stopped. Silence fell so thick it made his ears ring. Then came a sound behind him, bare feet slapping wet ground. He spun around, flashlight beam cutting through rain and branches. Nothing. Just fog and the outline of the path behind him. He stepped backward slowly, his boots sinking into mud. That was when he saw it. Something pale and hunched, crouching near the creek ahead. The light hit its back. Skin stretched tight over ribs. Long tangled hair clung to its shoulders. And then it turned its head toward him, eyes reflecting like an animal's but wide, human-shaped hollow. Jared froze. Every instinct screamed run, but his legs refused to move. The thing sniffed the air, tilted its head, and let out a soft moan. Not of pain, not of hunger. Something else. Something sad, he whispered again. Hey, are you okay?" His voice shook. It crawled closer, fast, faster than anything that frail should move. He fell backward into the mud, dropping his flashlight. The beam spun wildly, flashing across tree trunks and water before landing on a pair of feet, bare, muddy, clawed. Another figure stood behind him, then another and another. 3, maybe 4 figures, emaciated, pale, their movements jerky and twitching. Jared scrambled to his feet, running uphill as fast as his body could go. He could hear them behind him, their breathing sharp, their feet slapping the mud, their guttural voices whispering something that sounded almost like his name. He ran until his lungs burned. He tripped over a root and crashed into the dirt, rolling down a slope. When he stopped, his flashlight was gone. Darkness swallowed him whole. He could still hear them, circling, sniffing. Then came a voice, a whisper so close to his ear it made him jolt. Stay with us," Jared screamed and ran. He did not care which direction anymore. The forest was endless. The sounds of pursuit faded and returned, like they were playing with him. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time stopped making sense. When he finally stumbled onto an old road, he collapsed in the middle of it, chest heaving, body shaking. Headlights. A pickup truck came around the bend, honking. The driver slammed the brakes just in time. Jared was pulled into the truck by an old man in flannel. "Boy, what the hell are you doing out here this late?" the man said, eyes darting toward the tree line. Jared couldn't speak. He just pointed toward the woods. The old man's face went pale. "You saw them, didn't you?" Jared nodded, trembling. "Son," the man whispered, "those ain't people anymore. They were left behind generations ago. Some say a sickness took 'em. Some say they never were right to begin with. But they come out every October, when the moon hides behind the mountain and the air turns colder than it should." Jared looked through the fog truck window as they drove off. He could see them just for a moment, standing at the edge of the road, watching, silent, unmoving. Their eyes glowed faint in the dark. The old man muttered a prayer under his breath. "Don't ever go back down that trail again, son. Once they've seen you, they remember you." That same October, a small group of urban explorers came from Atlanta. They had heard the same stories Jared had, but they treated them like a challenge. They wanted proof. Their leader, Mason, was a YouTuber who specialized in exploring abandoned places. "We're going deep into Appalachia," he told his followers on camera. "Locals say the feral people come out in October. Let's see if they're real." They reached the old trail just after midnight. The air was heavy, the forest alive with sounds, owls, rustling leaves, distant streams. Mason had his flashlight mounted on his camera, narrating as they moved deeper. But something was off. Every time he tried to speak, his mic picked up faint whispers. When he played it back, the whispers were saying his name. "Dude, that's creepy," one of the others said. They kept going. Found a campsite, still warm, but no one around. A torn sleeping bag. Fresh footprints. They followed them downhill, into a narrow gorge lined with stone walls. That was when the smell hit them. Rotten wet fur. Mason turned his light toward the smell and the beam caught movement. Dozens of eyes glowing faintly between the rocks. He thought it was animals, until they stepped into view. They were human-shaped, yes, but their arms hung too long, their skin sagged like wet paper, their faces blank and open-mouthed as if frozen mid-scream. They crept closer, soundless, their feet barely touching the ground. Mason whispered, "Run." They dropped the camera and bolted. The footage later recovered from the forest ends in static and screams, one of the explorers crying, "They're in the trees! They're in the trees!" Only one of the group made it out, barely coherent, said they were surrounded by voices that weren't there. The video never got uploaded. The channel went dark the next week. Local rangers closed that area for seasonal maintenance. But the locals knew better. They always know better. Every October, hikers vanish. Search teams go in and come back short a man. And when the wind is still, the mountain seems to whisper. Some say the feral ones are not monsters at all, but a reflection of the people who once lived there. Starved. Forgotten. Others say they are something older. Something that was here before us, but Jared, he never went back. He moved to the city, far away from any forest. But sometimes when the power goes out and the night gets too quiet, he swears he can hear that same crying sound outside his window. Soft, trembling, human, calling him back home. The night started calm, still and quiet. Too quiet for the heart of the Appalachian woods. The kind of silence that feels wrong, like the forest itself is holding its breath. Eli Turner had lived in those mountains his entire life. He was a hunter, a tracker, and a man who thought he had seen everything nature could throw at him. But that October night changed everything he believed about what lived in those hills. It began when his hunting dogs refused to leave the porch. Normally they would tear off into the trees the second he opened the gate. But that evening they just stood there, tails low, growling softly at the woods. Eli clicked his tongue. "Come on now, ain't nothing out there." But deep down he knew better. He could feel it, the weight in the air, the way the trees seemed to lean closer together, as if trying to warn him not to go. Still he grabbed his rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and stepped into the darkness. The trail was damp from earlier rain, and mist crawled along the ground like something alive. The moon hid behind heavy clouds, giving the woods an ink-black depth that swallowed his flashlight beam whole. He didn't go far before he found the first sign. A deer carcass torn open, not eaten, not hunted, just destroyed. Its eyes were gone, and its legs were bent at impossible angles. Eli crouched down, frowning. "What in the—" He stopped when he noticed the tracks in the mud. Bare feet, dozens of them, some small, some large, but all of them human. He felt a chill creep up his spine. The nearest town was 20 miles away. No one should be barefoot out here this time of year. A faint sound broke the silence, something clicking, like rocks tapping together. Then another sound, low humming, rising and falling in a strange rhythmic pattern. It echoed from deep in the hollow ahead. He turned off his flashlight, listened. The humming stopped. Then, from behind him, a whisper. Eli, he froze, his name. Spoken soft and slow, like a voice he knew from long ago. He turned fast, raising his rifle, but there was nothing there. just fog and the faint creak of trees in the wind. He started back toward his cabin, but the trail was gone. Somehow, he had walked in circles, or maybe the forest had shifted around him. The mist grew thicker and the air colder. He could see his breath now. Then came movement. Something tall and thin crossed the path ahead, just out of sight. It moved too smooth, too fast. Eli aimed his rifle, heart pounding. "Who's there?" he shouted. "Show yourself." No response. Just that clicking sound again, closer now, circling him. He began backing up step by step. A branch snapped behind him, and before he could turn, something cold brushed against his neck. He spun around and fired. The gunshot echoed through the trees. Silence. Then laughter. Low, raspy, human, but wrong. It came from everywhere at once. Eli ran. Branches whipped his face. His boots pounded the mud, and the forest seemed endless. He tripped, fell hard, and when he looked up, he saw them, 3 figures standing in a semicircle ahead. They were tall, skin stretched pale and thin, eyes black as coal. Their bodies were covered in dirt and moss, as if they'd crawled out of the earth itself. Eli crawled backward, fumbling to reload his rifle. One of them stepped closer, its mouth twitching into what might have been a smile. It spoke, but not with words. More like breath. "Stay with us," he fired again. This time the shot hit. The figure fell, but when Eli looked again, it was gone. The other 2 melted into the darkness. He ran the rest of the way home without looking back. When he burst into his cabin, he locked the door, lit every lantern he had, and sat trembling in his chair. His dogs were whining, tails between their legs, staring at the door. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Eli held his rifle tight. "You get away from here," he shouted. The knocking stopped. For hours he sat awake, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, the porch was covered in footprints. Bare, muddy, human footprints leading from the forest to his door, but none leading back. He moved out of the mountains 2 days later. Never spoke of it again, but locals say his cabin still stands, empty, door still scarred where something had clawed at it. And on October nights, if you walk close enough, you can still hear the knocking. A week after Eli left, a pair of wildlife researchers entered the same forest. They were studying migration patterns and had set up trail cameras along the ridge. When they returned to collect the footage, they found every camera torn down, except one. That single camera captured something none of them could explain. At first, the footage was normal, trees swaying, rain dripping from leaves. Then around 2:47 a.m., a shape moved across the frame, human-shaped, crawling on all fours, hair long and tangled. It stopped in front of the camera, tilted its head and stared directly into the lens. Its eyes reflected white. Its mouth hung open wide enough to look inhuman. Then, slowly, it reached forward and covered the lens with its hand. The screen went black. When the team played the audio from that clip, they heard whispering beneath the wind. A voice repeating a single word. Cold. The footage was sent to the university, but within days it vanished from their database. The researchers were told to keep quiet. One of them quit the project and moved out of state. The other stayed. 2 months later, he disappeared while camping near the same ridge. The only thing found was his tent shredded and a notebook with one final entry. "They're watching from the trees. Faces that don't blink. I think they're waiting for the cold." Down in the nearest town, stories began to spread again. The locals whispered about the October kin, feral people who once lived underground to survive the winters and never came back the same. Others said they were something else entirely, nature's revenge for what humans did to the mountain. Old women warned kids not to follow voices after dark. Men nailed charms to their doors. And the dogs, every October, started barking at the hills for no reason anyone could see. But there is always someone who doesn't listen. Always someone who thinks they can prove the stories wrong, like the 2 hikers from Kentucky who vanished last year. Search teams found their campsite untouched, food still on the fire. But the perimeter of their tent was surrounded by dozens of small handprints, pressed deep into the dirt. Some of those prints were the size of a child's. Some were much larger. And on one of the tent walls, written in mud, were 3 words: "You came back." When the fog rolls low in Appalachia and the air turns sharp, remember this: the forest remembers too. It remembers everyone who entered and never left. It remembers the ones who screamed and the ones who tried to reason. And when the wind moves through the trees in October, sometimes you can hear it whisper names, the ones who ignored the warnings. It started with a smell: rot, smoke, and iron, thick enough to sting the back of the throat. The kind of scent that makes your instincts whisper leave. But for Caleb Morris, leaving wasn't an option. He was a paramedic from Boone County, one of the few people brave or foolish enough to take the emergency call that came through on Halloween night. The dispatcher's voice had trembled. "Abandoned farmhouse up on Crow's Hollow Road. Caller said there's movement inside. No power, no other responders nearby. Proceed with caution." Caleb had heard stories about Crow's Hollow. Everyone had. The locals called it the house that breathes. Supposedly built on a sinkhole, the ground there shifted like something alive beneath the foundation. People claimed the house had been empty for decades, but lights were sometimes seen in the windows, faint and flickering like lanterns in fog. He thought it was all superstition, until that night. The drive up was a nightmare. Dense fog, winding dirt roads, and a sense that the forest was watching him. He could swear he saw shapes moving between the trees, just beyond the reach of his headlights. By the time he reached the old gate, the air felt heavier. He parked the ambulance, grabbed his flashlight, and radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've arrived at the location. No visible movement yet. Static." He tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Nothing. He sighed, pushing open the gate. The hinges screamed in protest. The path beyond was overgrown, the grass high and damp. Each step sounded too loud. The wind died completely. When he reached the porch, he saw the door was already open. Not kicked in, just hanging slightly ajar. "Hello?" he called. "This is EMS. Anyone in need of assistance?" No answer. Just a faint dripping sound from somewhere inside. He stepped over the threshold. The smell hit him again, rot, metallic and old. The beam of his flashlight danced over peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and deep claw marks across the wooden walls. He froze when he saw a figure in the hallway. A woman standing perfectly still, her back turned to him. Long hair hung down past her shoulders, grey and matted. "Ma'am?" he said gently, taking a step forward. "Are you injured?" The woman didn't move. He took another step. "I'm here to help." "Are you alone?" Then she turned. Her face was wrong, mouth too wide, eyes sunken but glowing faintly from within, like something burning behind them. Her lips twisted, and in a voice that sounded both distant and near, she whispered, "You came too late." Caleb stumbled back, his flashlight flickering. When the light steadied again, she was gone. Only a puddle of water remained where she'd stood, though the house had no plumbing, no leaks, and no rain had touched the floor. He backed away slowly, radio trembling in his hand. "Dispatch, I have possible hallucinations or visual disturbances. Requesting backup. Static again." He turned to leave, only to see the front door was now closed. Something was moving upstairs. heavy dragging steps pacing back and forth. He aimed his light at the staircase. "Hello?" The footsteps stopped. He waited, frozen, for what felt like minutes. Then thud. Something fell hard upstairs. He swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to get out, but his training told him someone might be hurt. Against better judgment, he climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under his boots. The air grew colder with every foot higher. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and dark. Several doors, all slightly open. He tried the first one. Empty. The second filled with old furniture draped in sheets. The third door was different. The handle was wet, slick with something dark. He wiped his hand on his uniform and pushed it open. The beam of his light revealed the source of the sound, something lying on the floor, tangled in cloth. At first he thought it was a mannequin. Then it moved, a man, barely alive, skin pale and eyes wild. His lips quivered as he tried to speak. "They're in the walls," he rasped. They don't want you here." "Who?" Caleb asked. "Who's in the walls?" The man shuddered, his head twitching toward the ceiling. "They smell the living." Before Caleb could respond, the wall beside him moved. The wooden boards bulged outward, like something massive was crawling just behind them. The man on the floor screamed, convulsed, and then silence. Caleb stumbled backward, flashlight shaking. The bulge in the wall stopped. Then a voice came from behind the boards, soft, female. "Don't leave yet." He ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, toward the door that had been closed. It was open again. The fog outside had thickened so much he couldn't see 10 feet ahead. He sprinted toward the ambulance, but when he looked back, there were figures on the porch. Dozens of them, pale, thin, watching. He jumped into the vehicle, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine roared to life. Headlights cut through the fog, revealing something standing in the middle of the road. It was the woman, the one from inside. Her mouth opened wider than any human mouth should. Her voice came through every radio channel at once, whispering, "Stay with us, Caleb." The engine died. Every light in the ambulance went out, and then nothing but darkness and breathing. 2 days later, the ambulance was found parked on the same road, engine off, doors locked from the inside. Caleb was gone. No signs of struggle, just his flashlight on the seat still on, pointing toward the tree line. Investigators noticed something strange in the mud. Footprints leading away from the driver's side door. Bare feet, but they didn't go far. They stopped after 20 feet, ending abruptly as if the person had simply vanished. Locals weren't surprised. They said Crow's Hollow had been cursed since 1911, when a family living there disappeared overnight. Only their youngest child was found wandering the road, whispering about the wet ones who came from beneath the floor. The house still stands, hidden deep within the forest. Some nights, hikers claim they see lights in the windows again, soft, flickering like lanterns in fog. But everyone who's gone to check has gone missing. Every single one. If you ever find yourself driving through the Appalachians on Halloween night, and your GPS takes you down a narrow dirt road, turn back. No shortcut is worth it. No thrill is worth the silence that waits there. Because some places are not abandoned. They are waiting. And sometimes what you think is an empty house is just a shell. Something old and hollow breathing quietly, listening for the next person foolish enough to step inside. And if you hear a woman's voice, whisper your name from the fog. Run, run, and do not look back. There are places in the Appalachian Mountains where even sound feels afraid to travel. You can scream, and your voice just disappears, like the air itself swallows it. That is where I found the cabin. or maybe where it found me. I had been tracking reports of feral sightings for weeks, all circling the same region, an area locals called the Stillwood Basin. No one lived there anymore. Not since the fires, but one night, a ranger station camera caught something human-shaped crawling across the frame on all fours. Too fast, too low, too wrong. So I went. It was nearly October's end. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. The ground soft and slick, my tires struggling on the narrow dirt road that twisted through the pines. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No crickets, no birds, no wind. It was like the world was holding its breath. My headlights caught something nailed to a tree. A sign, hand-carved, letters uneven. Turn around. They come out when the mist does. I stopped, staring at the words until my chest tightened. Then I saw movement. Something white flashed in the tree line. It wasn't an animal. It stood upright, thin as a shadow. But when my lights hit it, it dropped low and darted out of sight. My pulse spiked. I wanted to reverse, to go back, but the road was too narrow. I had to keep going until I could turn around safely. That's when the fog rolled in, dense, cold, suffocating. My windshield fogged up so badly I could barely see the road. I pulled over, turned on my hazards, and got out, hoping to wipe the glass clear. The air outside was colder than it should have been. Unnatural, almost metallic. As I wiped the windshield, I heard something from the woods behind me. Thump. Then another, closer. I froze. The sound wasn't footsteps. It was heavier, like someone dragging a wet sack through the leaves. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. There was nothing there. Just fog and trees stretching forever. Then came a whisper, right next to my ear. Don't look too long. I spun around, heart slamming, but there was no one behind me. I got back into the car, slammed the door, and locked it. My breathing was uneven, my hand slick with sweat as I turned the key. The engine sputtered, then died. The radio flickered on by itself, static at first. Then a faint voice. It's been waiting for you. I yanked the power cord, but the voice kept going. They live in the hollow earth. They wear what's left of us. Then silence, and that's when I saw it. A cabin, half collapsed, barely visible through the mist. The shape of it made no sense. It leaned like it was sinking into the ground, windows shattered, roof caved in. Yet there was a faint orange glow inside, flickering like a candle. Curiosity is a disease, and that night it infected me completely. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, stepped out of the car, and followed the narrow dirt path that led toward it. The mud clung to my boots with each step, the air thick and buzzing with that same smell I'd come to associate with them, iron and rot. As I got closer, I noticed something hanging from the porch rafters, bones, small ones. Animal, maybe, maybe not. I swallowed hard and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the air was warm, too warm. The glow I'd seen wasn't a candle. It was a lantern, sitting on the floor beside a metal basin filled with what looked like blood. Something moved in the corner. I aimed my light and froze. There was a man crouched there, or what was left of one. His skin was gray, his eyes cloudy. He rocked back and forth, whispering to himself. They said it was just hunger. He muttered, "But it's more. So much more. Sir," I said carefully, "I can help you. I'm not here to hurt you." He looked up. His teeth were blackened, broken, his face smeared with dirt. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered. "They're not people. Not anymore." I took a step back. "Who's not?" He smiled, a horrible stretched thing. "The ones under the hill. Then, from beneath the cabin floor, came a sound. A scraping followed by wet breathing. The boards flexed under my boots. Something was crawling beneath me. The man started to laugh, a sharp, broken cackle that turned into a sob. "They heard you. They smell you." I turned for the door, but it slammed shut, hard. My flashlight flickered. The lantern dimmed. Then something reached through the gap in the floor. A hand gray, long-fingered, slick with mud. It clawed at the air, searching, feeling. I kicked it hard and stumbled backward. The boards cracked. The man screamed, "They're coming through!" The floorboards split open. Dozens of pale faces pushed through the gaps, mouths gaping wide, eyes cloudy and hollow. Their skin hung in strips, their limbs bending at wrong angles. They weren't climbing up, they were being pulled, dragged upward by something unseen. I ran, slammed through the door, tripped down the porch steps, hit the mud hard. Behind me I heard the cabin's timbers groan and collapse, but even as it fell, the voices didn't stop. They whispered from every direction. Different tones, different ages, chanting words I didn't understand. The trees seemed to sway closer, the fog twisting like fingers reaching for me. I sprinted back to my car, yanked the door open and started the engine. It roared to life this time, though I never touched the key. The radio came on again, the same static, but now there was a voice I recognized. Mine, saying the words I'd just heard in the cabin. "They smell you. They're coming through." I drove until the fog broke, until the forest fell away behind me. When I finally stopped miles down the mountain, I got out to breathe. And on the side of my car, carved deep into the paint, were handprints, dozens of them, small, gray, smeared with something dark. Later that night, I played the footage from my camera. Most of it was static, but for 20 seconds right before the feed cut, I saw the cabin. Whole again, the door open, and someone standing in the doorway. It was me. Except my eyes were gray, and I was smiling. The timestamp showed it was recorded an hour after I'd escaped. I threw the camera into the river the next morning. But sometimes, when I drive through the Appalachians late at night, my radio crackles to life, and I hear my own voice whisper, "Don't look too long. They see you when you stare." If you ever find yourself in Stillwood Basin and the mist rolls in faster than it should, leave. Because they are not lost people. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It clung to the air like a living thing, rotted meat and something sickly sweet underneath, like spoiled fruit. It was the kind of smell that told you to leave before your brain even processed why. But I didn't leave, because I had seen something. It was right there in the beam of my flashlight, half hidden behind the fallen branches and twisted roots of an old oak. A shape too pale, too human, crouching low. It moved when I moved, watched when I watched, and then it grinned. Its teeth were long, uneven and slick, catching the light like wet glass. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my grip, every instinct screaming to run. But before I could react, the thing tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously, and whispered my name. It should not have known my name. I stumbled back, my boot catching on a root. The flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled away, spinning its beam through the fog. For a moment, everything was nothing but white. Then the light stopped, illuminating a figure standing just feet from me. It wasn't the same one I'd seen a second ago. This one was taller, thinner, its face stretched like wax melting from a skull. Its eyes, God, its eyes. They looked human, but the expression behind them wasn't. It was something pretending to feel, pretending to mimic what it thought fear should look like. Then, without warning, it opened its mouth and screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was like metal tearing, mixed with the shriek of something burning alive. My ears rang, blood thudding in my head as I turned and bolted down the hill, crashing through the undergrowth, not caring where I went. Branches whipped my face, thorns tore at my jacket. I didn't stop until I reached the river, and that's when I saw the lights, across the water, flickering between the trees, lanterns, moving in a line, maybe 6 or 7 of them, weaving silently through the forest, each one carried by something walking upright but hunched, their movements jerky and unnatural. They didn't talk. They didn't make a sound, but they stopped, every single one of them, when I stepped into the clearing. The lanterns turned toward me, and for a second, I thought maybe I was seeing people, survivors. But then I saw their faces, not faces, masks. They were wearing the skin of something else, stitched crudely together, dried and stretched, mouths sewn shut, eye holes carved too wide. They just stood there, across the river, lanterns glowing faintly orange, breathing in perfect unison. Then one of them raised its free hand and pointed at me, and suddenly they all dropped their lanterns. The lights hit the ground and went out, one after another, until the forest was pitch black. Then came the splashes. They were crossing. I turned and ran again, my lungs burning, the cold air slicing through me like glass. The forest behind me erupted with movement, wet footsteps slapping the mud, heavy breaths closing in. I didn't dare look back. After what felt like hours, I reached the remnants of an old mining road. I followed it until I saw a shape in the distance. An old shack, sagging under the weight of years, half swallowed by vines. The door was open. I ducked inside and slammed it shut, bracing it with a broken plank. My hands were shaking too hard to hold my flashlight steady, but I managed to click it on. The interior was worse than the outside. Animal bones littered the floor, some gnawed clean, others still slick. There were claw marks on the walls, long, deep ones that cut straight through the wood. And in the corner, something hung from the rafters. At first I thought it was a deer, but when I got closer I realized it was wearing clothes. A human, or what was left of one. The skin was stretched thin across its face, mouth sewn shut with black thread. Its chest was hollow, ribs visible through torn flesh. But the worst part was the sound. It was breathing, very faintly. My throat tightened as I took a slow step back. Then I saw movement under the floorboards, small, quick, like something crawling beneath the wood. The boards bulged slightly, then settled again. I held my breath, and the thing hanging from the ceiling twitched. Once, then again. Its head turned, slowly toward me, the sound of the thread tearing filling the silence. The mouth began to move, strings snapping, blood dripping down its chin. It wasn't breathing anymore, it was laughing. I bolted for the door, threw the plank aside, and ran into the night. Outside, the fog had grown thicker. The world felt smaller, pressed tight around me. I could hear them behind me now, those low, guttural sounds like laughter and crying mixed together. The feral people of Appalachia. I ran until the ground fell away, and I realized I was standing on the edge of a ravine. No way forward. The sounds grew louder, closer. I could hear them moving between the trees, circling me. The air buzzed with that sickly smell again. I backed up to a rock, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. Then I saw her, standing across the ravine, just barely visible through the mist. A woman, pale, barefoot, wearing a tattered white dress soaked through with mud. Her hair hung over her face, long and matted. She was holding something in her hands. It took me a moment to realize what it was. My camera. The same one I'd lost 2 days earlier. She lifted her head slowly, strands of hair sticking to her face, and smiled. Her mouth was too wide. The corners split open as she whispered across the ravine, "You left it for us." Then she began to walk forward. Not around. Through. Her feet touched the air as she stepped off the opposite ledge, the mist swirling around her like invisible hands holding her up. And then she wasn't across the ravine anymore. She was right in front of me. Her skin was gray and cracked, her eyes nothing but dark pits. She reached out, fingers stretching longer and longer, curling toward my face. I swung the flashlight, hitting her arm. It shattered like glass. She screamed, a sound that split the air, and then she was gone, melted back into the fog. But something else was still there. From behind the trees, shapes began to emerge, dozens of them, crawling, dragging, lurching forward on all fours. Their movements were jerky like puppets on strings. Some were missing limbs. Some had faces that didn't match their bodies. They gathered in silence, heads tilting in unison, eyes reflecting the faint beam of my light. Then, as if following some silent command, they all opened their mouths at once and began to hum. It wasn't a tune, it was a vibration, deep and low, that rattled the ground beneath me. My vision blurred, my heart pounded against my ribs so hard it hurt. Then they stopped, and one of them, an old man with skin like leather and teeth sharp as nails, spoke. "October is the month of taking," he rasped, "and you have wandered too far." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "I didn't mean to," he smiled. "They never mean to." Behind him, more shapes emerged, tall ones, thin ones, and something much larger, moving through the trees like smoke. The old man raised a finger to his lips. "The woods remember the ones who stay too long. You'll see." Then the world tilted. My knees buckled, vision darkened. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a pale hand reaching from the fog, pressing gently against my face. When I woke, it was morning. The forest was quiet again. No fog, no tracks. My flashlight lay beside me, dead. My camera was gone. But when I looked down at my wrist, there was something carved into my skin. A single word, written in jagged letters, October, and beneath it, tiny handprints, dozens of them. That was 3 years ago. Every year since, on the same night, I hear that humming again, faintly, somewhere deep in the woods near my house, and each year, the sound gets closer. They say the feral people of Appalachia disappear when winter comes, retreating to whatever underground world they crawled out. It began again 2 nights before Halloween. The air felt wrong, too still, too thick. The kind of silence that pressed down on you until you could hear your own heartbeat echoing inside your skull. I hadn't been back to those woods since that night 3 years ago. But Appalachia has a way of bringing what it wants to you, and this time, it found me. I was sitting on the porch of my cabin, staring into the tree line when I heard it. The hum, faint, almost like a memory. But it was there. That same low vibration that made the glass of water on my table ripple. I froze. Then, from the tree line, came a flash of movement, something pale, barefoot, watching. I grabbed my flashlight, my breath catching as I scanned the dark. The beam caught only fog, curling around the trunks like smoke. But when I turned back toward the porch, I noticed something new, muddy footprints leading up the steps, and they stopped right beside my chair. That was when the air shifted again. I could feel it, the presence, the way the woods seemed to lean closer. I whispered to myself, not again. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't something you could escape, because when the mountains want you, they take you. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin floorboards felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind whispered my name. I told myself it was paranoia, the ghosts of memory crawling back from the corners of my mind. But then came the knock. 3 soft knocks, slow, deliberate. I waited, gripping the flashlight tight, but no one spoke. Just silence. Then another knock, lower this time, coming from under the floor. I stood still, every nerve in my body screaming. The sound came again. This time it was closer, directly beneath where I stood. I backed away slowly, eyes locked on the ground, and then snap. A board cracked open at my feet. Something pale slipped through the gap, a hand, thin, long-fingered, the nails blackened and broken. It clawed at the air before vanishing again. The floor settled, then nothing. I ran outside, heart hammering. The woods were dead quiet. But then, movement again. At the edge of the trees stood a figure. Not one of the twisted, feral things I had seen before. This one was tall, almost elegant. Its body thin but symmetrical. Its face human but wrong. Too symmetrical, too smooth, like someone had built it from memory. It tilted its head, studying me like a specimen. Then it spoke. "You went too deep," it said in a voice that sounded like wind through hollow bones. "Now you belong to the holler." My throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" The figure smiled. Its teeth were white and perfect and endless. "We don't want, we remember." And with that, it faded into the fog. When I stepped back inside, I saw something new on the table. My old camera, the one the woman in the ravine had been holding years ago. Its lens cracked, covered in dried mud. My hands trembled as I lifted it. The power light blinked red. Dead. I pressed the button anyway, and somehow it turned on. The screen flickered to life. Static. Then an image. It was my cabin. But not from outside. From inside, the camera placed where I was standing right now. I watched in horror as the footage continued. There I was, sleeping on the couch. Then slowly something crawled out from under the floorboards. It was small at first, a child maybe, but as it stood, its body stretched, limbs lengthening, spine cracking into place. It leaned over me, watching for a long time before lowering its mouth toward my ear. I could not hear what it said. But in the video, I saw myself twitch, whisper something back, and then fall still again. Then the creature turned its head and looked directly into the camera. The footage cut to black. That was enough. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, and drove. I did not care where. I just needed to get away from Appalachia. But you can't outrun what's part of the land. After an hour of driving through winding mountain roads, the fog grew thicker. My headlights cut through white walls of mist, and every mile looked the same. I should have reached the highway by then, but I didn't. The GPS was frozen. My phone had no signal, and then I saw it. The same shack. The one from years ago. Somehow I had come full circle. I hit the brakes, skidding to a stop on the gravel. My breath caught in my throat as I stared through the windshield. Because standing in the middle of the road was a man. Not feral. Not wild, dressed like a park ranger. He lifted a hand, signaling me to roll down my window. Against every instinct I did. Roads closed up ahead, he said. His voice was calm, too calm. Accident on the mountain. I nodded. Thanks. I'll turn around. But before I could shift the gear, he leaned closer. His eyes were empty. No pupils, no whites, just darkness. Too late to turn around now, he said, and then he smiled. When I blinked, he was gone. Just gone. My car engine sputtered, the lights dimming, then died. The radio came on by itself, static first, then a faint voice. It was mine. Don't let them in. The same phrase repeated again and again, warped and distant. I stumbled out of the car and ran down the road. Headlights cutting through the fog behind me like dying stars. The forest opened up to my left, and through the mist, I saw shapes moving, low to the ground, crawling, whispering. I picked up my pace. Then, out of nowhere, the road ended. I was standing at the edge of a clearing, the old mining tunnel just beyond. I remembered it. The one sealed off decades ago after a collapse. But now the boards had been torn away, the entrance gaping like a mouth. And from deep inside came that same sound again, the humming, louder this time. Something inside me said run, something older said listen. And I made the mistake of listening. The humming grew deeper, vibrating the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet. Then faintly through the dark of the tunnel I saw eyes, hundreds of them. They were watching from the walls, from the ceiling, from the cracks in the rock. Their glow pulsed with the rhythm of the hum. Then came the whispers. You saw us. You left us. You brought us back. The sound grew unbearable. I felt my knees covering my ears, but the voices were inside my head now, crawling through my thoughts like worms. Then something touched my shoulder. Cold. Wet. Human. I turned, expecting one of them, but it was a child, a little girl, no older than 6, with hair like straw and dirt streaking her face. Don't stay, she whispered. They're hungry. Before I could respond, hands shot from the tunnel, dozens of them grabbing her, dragging her, screaming back into the dark. I reached out, but she vanished, and in that instant, I knew this wasn't just a curse, it was a cycle. Every October, the feral people of Appalachia came back to feed, to reclaim those who had wandered too close, and to mark new ones for the next year, and I was one of them now. The humming stopped. Silence fell. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering. When it steadied again, the tunnel was empty. No eyes, no hands. Just stone. But on the ground, carved into the dirt with perfect precision, was a message. See you on Halloween. I ran until dawn, and when I finally reached the main road, there was no sign of fog, no sound, no smell. Just morning, but the back seat of my car was wet, and in the rearview mirror something moved. I opened my eyes to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that feels wrong, heavy, alive. The forest was too still. No wind, no insects, no rustle of branches. Even the air refused to move. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to arrive. My legs trembled as I pushed myself upright. My clothes were soaked in cold dew. The ground beneath me pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat buried beneath the soil. I could not tell if it was the earth or the thing beneath it. The sky above was colorless, washed out, and the trees around me leaned inward, their branches twisted like arms reaching toward me. Every direction looked the same. Endless forest, suffocating fog, no road, no sound of civilization. And then I noticed something carved into the tree beside me. It was my name. Fresh, dripping with what looked like blood. I stumbled back, breathing hard, heart hammering in my chest. This could not be real. I had to be dreaming, hallucinating. But then I heard it, the low, wet hiss of something crawling behind me. I turned slowly. A figure stood between the trees, half hidden by the mist. Too tall to be human. Its spine bent at impossible angles. Its skin shimmered in patches, as if made from the same damp rock that lined the tunnel walls. And where its face should have been, there was only movement, skin folding, reforming, whispering words that did not belong to this world. I took a step back, but my foot sank into something soft. I looked down, bones, dozens of them, some still fresh, others gnawed clean. Among them, a camera lens glinted faintly in the light. Mine. I froze. I remembered smashing it, yet here it was, spotless, waiting for me. The screen lit up on its own, static, then a recording. My voice. I'm still here, it said, but I am not me anymore. The thing between the trees moved closer. Its footsteps made no sound, yet every time it shifted, I could feel the ground ripple beneath my feet. My instincts screamed to run, but every direction looked the same. The forest had changed. The landmarks were gone. The path I thought I had come from now curved into darkness, so I ran anyway. Branches tore at my arms, roots caught my ankles, but I kept moving until I burst into a clearing I had never seen before. In the center stood a cabin, old, rotting, smoke, curling faintly from a crooked chimney. There was no sound except the creak of its door swaying in the wind. Something inside whispered. My name. I should have turned away, but that pull, the same one that had dragged me into the mountain, was back. My body moved without my permission. The inside was worse. The floor was soaked with black water, reflecting faint shapes that didn't match what stood above. The walls were covered in photos, hundreds of them, of people staring directly into the camera. Faces I had seen before, from the missing posters, from the old newspaper clippings. Their eyes were hollow, their smiles forced, and in every photo in the background was the same thing. That figure, the mountain creature. I stepped closer to one of the photos, and as I did, something shifted in the reflection of the water. The faces began to move. Their mouths opened. Their eyes rolled back. "Stay," they whispered. The floor cracked. Something below began to push upward, slowly, deliberately. The board split apart, revealing a dark pit beneath, and the smell that poured out was unbearable. 1,000 voices rose from the hole, chanting in a language older than time. Then, through the darkness, hands began to climb out. Pale, broken hands, dozens, maybe hundreds. They clawed at the air, dragging themselves upward. The feral ones, the forgotten. I backed into a wall, but it wasn't a wall anymore. It pulsed beneath my touch. Flesh. The entire cabin was alive. The boards began to bleed, and through the open doorway I saw it again. The tall one, the mouthless god of the mountain, the one the others had worshipped. It stepped closer, the ground trembling with each movement. The air around it vibrated with whispers, thousands of them overlapping. "You came to remember," it said inside my head. "Now you will never forget." I screamed and swung the hatchet. It hit nothing. The creature dissolved into shadow, its form rippling across the room before reappearing behind me. It leaned close. I could feel its breath, cold, damp, heavy with the stench of the earth. "The mountain takes what it is owed," it murmured, and then it placed its hand over my chest. Pain exploded through me. My vision shattered. I saw flashes, faces of every person who had ever vanished here, their souls trapped, whispering from beneath the soil. I saw tunnels stretching for miles beneath the earth, glowing veins pulsing with a sickly red light. I saw the heart of the mountain itself, alive, aware, feeding, and I saw myself among them, one of them. When I came to, I was lying in the same clearing, but the cabin was gone. The air was still. The fog had lifted. For a moment I thought I was free. Then I looked down at my hands. My skin was darker, coarse, my nails blackened. My reflection in a puddle nearby showed a face that was not entirely mine. Eyes too hollow, mouth too wide, skin blending with the earth. I screamed, but the sound that came out wasn't human. It was the humming, the same sound that had haunted me from the start. The sound of the mountain, remembering. I stumbled through the forest for what felt like hours until I found a road. A car stopped when they saw me. The driver rolled down his window, eyes wide in fear. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Are you okay?" I tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. "You should leave." He didn't listen. He stepped out, coming closer, flashlight trembling in his hand. "Hey, it's all right. You're safe now." But he wasn't. Behind him, the trees began to move, not from wind, but from something pushing through them. The humming grew louder again, shaking the ground. His flashlight flickered, and in the moment of darkness I saw them all, the feral ones, the forgotten, crawling out from the trees, from the dirt, from the shadows themselves. I shouted for him to run, but it was too late. The mountain had already claimed him. The ground split open, swallowing him whole. His scream was cut off instantly, and then the silence returned. I fell to my knees, shaking. I could feel it growing stronger inside me, its voice, its hunger. I was becoming what I feared most. I looked down the road. In the distance I saw headlights. Another car coming, and I realized something terrible. This never ends. The mountain does not hunt people, it calls them. Every few years it chooses someone to find it, to feed it, to remember its name, and this time it chose me. Now I wander the back roads of Appalachia, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to answer the humming in the hills. When they do, I'll be there, watching, smiling, whispering the same words that were whispered to me. The mountain keeps, the mountain takes, the mountain never forgets. It was Halloween night when the humming came back. Not faint, not distant, but loud, vibrating the glass in the windows, shaking dust from the ceiling beams, rattling my bones. I woke to it, gasping for air, the sound crawling through my veins like something alive. Outside, the sky was the color of ash. The trees bent in the wind, groaning under a heavy fog that had rolled in thicker than before. The entire forest seemed to breathe in unison, each gust of wind a pulse from something massive, something waiting beneath the earth. I had told myself I would never go back there. Not to that tunnel, not to those woods. But I knew now it wasn't about choice. I could feel it, the same pull that brought the others before me. The same whisper in the back of the mind that said, "You owe them." So I packed a lantern, my old camera, and the only weapon I had, a rusted hatchet from the shed, and walked straight into the dark. The humming grew louder the deeper I went. I followed the sound down the old service road, past the tree line where the air grew colder, wetter. The ground was slick with mud, the scent of iron and rot filling my lungs. Then I saw the first sign, literally. A wooden board nailed to a tree, the words carved into it with something sharp. turn back. They're hungry. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I finally understood this wasn't some legend. It was a warning for people like me, the ones who never listened. But I kept walking. The fog thickened until I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My lantern's glow flickered in the wet air, making shadows move where nothing should. Every sound was amplified, the snap of a twig, the squish of mud, the faint splash of footsteps that weren't mine. When I finally reached the tunnel, it looked worse than before. The wooden beams that once sealed it had been ripped apart completely. The entrance gaped like a throat, breathing out cold air that smelled of decay and something else, like old blood. The humming was deafening now. I hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The walls dripped with condensation and the ceiling hung low. The light from my lantern danced across symbols etched into the rock, circles, spirals, and strange runes that pulsed faintly as I passed. The deeper I went, the warmer the air became, heavy with moisture. Then I saw them. Bodies. Not fresh. Not entirely decomposed either. They hung from the walls, their limbs woven into the rock itself as if the mountain had swallowed them whole. Their eyes had been replaced with hollow stones that shimmered faintly in the light. Every few seconds, one of the bodies twitched as if still alive somewhere deep inside. I wanted to run, but something kept me still. From deeper within the tunnel came a sound, a rhythm. Not humming this time, chanting, low, guttural, and old. I moved toward it, my feet dragging as if the air itself resisted me. The passage opened into a vast cavern, lit by a fire that burned blue and green. Around it stood figures, dozens of them, the feral people. But now I saw what they truly were. Their bodies were wrong, half human, half something else. Skin stretched too tight, bones protruding in places they shouldn't. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the fire's eerie colors. And in the center of them all stood one taller than the rest, its face smooth like stone, its mouth moving with every word of the chant. They didn't look at me right away. It was like they already knew I was there. When the chanting stopped, the leader finally turned its head toward me. Its eyes were dark, endless. "You came back," it said, voice rippling through the air like an echo. I raised the hatchet. "What do you want from me?" The thing smiled. "To finish what was started, to remember what you forgot." I shook my head, backing away. "I don't belong here." Its smile widened, stretching too far, cracking the skin at the corners. "You always did." And then I saw it, the camera. My camera, sitting on a stone near the fire. It was playing something, footage of me, not from before, from now. It showed me standing exactly where I was, holding the lantern, facing them. But in the video, something was behind me. Something massive. I spun around, the lantern trembling in my grip, and there it was, a shape rising from the shadows, taller than any man. Its body was made of the same black rock as the mountain, its arms long and jointed wrong, its head bending to fit beneath the ceiling. And where its face should have been, there were only mouths, hundreds of them, whispering in unison. The sound hit me like pressure. The wall shook. My vision blurred. I tried to run, but hands shot from the ground, clutching my legs. I swung the hatchet wildly, the blade sinking into something soft. A scream tore through the air, high-pitched, animal-like. The feral people scattered, melting into the shadows. But the thing didn't stop. It moved toward me, slow, deliberate. Its mouths began to chant, "Mountain keeps, mountain takes, mountain never forgets." The ground beneath me split, a fissure tearing through the cavern floor. I stumbled, the lantern falling from my hand and shattering. Darkness swallowed everything, and then silence. I woke up on the ground outside the tunnel. It was morning. Birds were chirping. The air was warm. My hands were covered in dirt and dried blood. I staggered to my feet, my head spinning. Had it all been a nightmare? I checked my pocket and froze. Inside was my camera. The lens cracked, mud still caked on it. I turned it on, and the screen flickered to life. Static. Then, an image. The same cavern. Empty. But in the corner, something moved. A figure crawling along the wall, limbs bending backward. Eyes glowing faintly. Then it turned toward the camera and whispered, "You're next." The screen went black. I threw the camera to the ground and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the road, until I could see sunlight breaking through the fog. I got into my car and drove without looking back. But the humming, it followed me. At first, faint, then louder. I rolled down the window trying to convince myself it was just the tires on the asphalt. But it wasn't. It was coming from under the car, and when I glanced into the rearview mirror, I saw it. Fingers long and thin curling up from beneath the seat. I swerved. The car, spinning off the road, slamming into a ditch. The world went white. When I woke, everything was still. My windshield was cracked, smoke rising from the hood. I turned my head slowly, and there it was, sitting in the passenger seat. One of them. It smiled, lips stretching wide enough to split its cheeks. Its eyes were dark pits, reflecting nothing. "Home," it whispered. Then it reached out, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the middle of the forest. My car was gone. My bag was gone. Everything gone. But the humming was everywhere, and I finally understood